Hello, everybody. Aldo J here. Hope you're doing well. I know it's Black Friday. Many of you might be out shopping and getting ready for a nice, long, and well deserved weekend. While I'm sitting here, I'm getting ready to probably, I don't know, lock myself in the studio and start thinking of some new songs or expanding upon some other ones that I have. But I thought let me follow up on my last video where I talked about how I got into music and the sparks and the genesis that got me to where I am. And I told you about some of my idols, right? One of them being my father first and foremost. How he was just always music in the house from day one to, I should say, from dusk until dawn, and from throughout the day there was always some form of music. And I remember even going to like doctor's appointment. I'd be in the waiting room listening to you know uh, a song on the radio, and I'd be tapping my foot, and my mom would go home and say, he can't keep still. He's like you. He's moving around. He gets up, he's doing things. If you ever see musicians and you see them doing stuff like this, like drummers and all, and you know, they're always thinking of something, or they turn, even if I heard it like a ratchet in the street the other day, and I started doing drums around it. It's like you're an OCD addict. You're always thinking of things. And that's what it was like for me, growing up and hearing this stuff every day of your life, and you're living and breathing it. But, and I talked about some other idols of mine. Eddie Van Halen was sort of the virtuoso who reminded me of my dad, but instead of clarinet, he was doing all this stuff, right? So Eddie was like, you figure my father had died in 1974, and Eddie came out in 78 with the first Van Halen record. So, I was like 13 years old, and I was blown away. And by that time I was already messing around with guitar and doing Kansas and, Blue Oyster Cult, Boston, Steve Miller, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, I think I said Blue Oyster Cult, all of those classic bands. But then Eddie comes on the scene and he's doing all this stuff. So, I had all of these different influences. And I mentioned to you how I was related to Valerie Bertinelli's family through my grandfather Bitelli. I remember my grandmother saying that Adeline Visby is coming over with Uncle Dino next week, and Angelina Bertinelli. And I'm like, what, Bertinelli? And then that's when we were watching TV that same day. She's like, oh, by the way, that's your cousin. And I'm like, when were you going to tell me this, right? So remember I told you I had a picture of Eddie Van Halen. Well, here it is. My grandmother called Aunt Adeline and said, hey, can you do me a favor? Do you have any pictures of Eddie and blah, 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 blah? And I think it was either a week or two. I think Eddie and Valerie were going to visit. And she might have called and said, bring some pictures, signed pictures, because my sister got a signed picture of Valerie and I got this Van Halen. And you can barely see it. And I'm sorry, I wish I could make you see it. But this was given to me in 1982. Think about that. I was floored. I was floored. And I still kept it all these years. And like I said, Eddie was always my the innovator that made me think out of the box, right? Try to do things differently. And I listened to many interviews over the course of time when Eddie used to say, I hated when people copied me. But then, as he matured and got older, he said, wow, I mean, I've opened the door for other guitar players to sort of expand upon things using my techniques. And there's not one band out there you see that today that doesn't do all this stuff and the stuff that he does, right? So, and it's how music evolves in that manner, right? It's just what it does. And that's what it did for me. Eddie kind of kept my father alive in a different way. Because when I would hear the arpeggios and the fast stuff, I I would remember and sit back hearing my dad play the clarinet in his studio. And I was always amazed by that, just the speed and just the accuracy. I mean, he was playing notes, my father. If you ever see the notes when they get more and more lines in them, that means the more notes is the less time you have to play them, but you still got to play them. So if you're doing something in 4/4 time, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see all this stuff. It's like, that's how fast it's moving, but it's accurate. It's perfect. And that was what my dad was, right? To be a graduate of Curtis Institute, which is a scholarship entrance only. You just don't get in there because you want to be a musician. You have to be brought in by a scholarship. Case closed. That's the requirement. And my dad, like I said, he played nonstop. He was the one that brought that discipline in me. And I learned it at a young age. I just didn't learn it with the piano. I learned it with the guitar, and I taught myself. And I would do whatever it took to learn certain things. But Eddie was the guy that got me into that. But I told you I like Joe Perry from Aerosmith. I don't have anything from Joe Perry because I never met him. But I did meet Buck Dharma. And Buck Dharma, as you could see, he gave me this CD last year, sent it to me, gave me guitar picks. And I want to tell you, I fell on my knees. I was amazed because Buck Dharma was during the time that my father had died, and I heard Don't Fear the Reaper, and Godzilla and all the other songs, but Don't Fear the Reaper put me in a state of melancholy where I could sit back and reflect on my dad. And it was hard. I was an introvert as a child because all I did was play my guitar. I mean, yeah, I had some friends that went out, played street hockey here and then, played a little basketball. But 9 out of 10 times I was rehearsing. I was learning stuff. I had my boombox, right? Many of you may not know what a boombox is. It was a wide rectangular radio with two big speakers and either two cassettes, dual cassette or single, and it had a radio attached to it. And you could put a blank tape and record from the radio, or just put in a cassette tape of your favorite band, which I did. And I would go through and play all the Van Halen stuff, or all the Blue Oyster Cult, all the Kansas, Aerosmith here, this and that. Buck Dharma was one of my favorite guitarists. I just loved the difference in him. He was so melodic. He was so the soul that I would feel in his playing. And there's a lot of differences. I met a lot of very outstanding guitar players. I saw a lot of bands. I love the neoclassical Yngwie Malmsteen. I love some of these heavy metal guys are really, really good. But you know what? I also got into the point where I learned that if you've ever seen the movie Eddie and the Cruisers, I think it's the second movie where the guitar player is doing all this, and Eddie's sitting in there watching him in the bar, and he gets up and he plays something soulful, and everybody was like, "Whoa," because the other guy just kept going doing, which has its place, right? But that's not to me, a musician that just can play fast, right? And that's what I learned from a lot of players. And I don't play super fast. There's times I do, but I don't make it part of who I am. I don't sit there and I got to outrun the next guy, you know? And there's those kind of guitar players are a dime a dozen. And I learned that it's the feeling that you have, right? There's a lot of players out there that may have played faster than Eddie Van Halen. But again, fast isn't everything. It's not. But I think Buck Dharma is one of the most underrated guitar players when I see all the host of other ones. And he just he did it for me in so many ways. I mean, I not only is he's a very humble human being. I had the pleasure of meeting him last year with Ernie Atella, our lead singer. We saw the show front row at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City, and Buck took time out of his busy touring schedule to come down from his hotel room and meet us and to talk to us. I had the CD before that, but I just even to spend a few moments, and he had a few rounds to make with other fans, which just goes to show you, you know, there's a lot of bands that they won't even sign one autograph, but Buck is the opposite. I wrote him a letter once, and I didn't really expect anything, and if I didn't, I understand. Well, he wrote me back, and not only did he gave me the opportunity of meeting him, and let me tell you something. Awesome. So I want to thank Buck Dharma for showing me that music is something that, you do until you can't do it anymore. And he's doing it still. And he's going out there, he's performing, he's on the road. He sounds to me just as good as he did 40, 50 years ago. Eddie Van Halen for, making me remember my dad in a lot of ways. Buck did that too. But Eddie taught me a lot of things about being innovative and trying things differently. But these two guitarists, Joe Perry, Jimmy Page, I could name a ton of them. There's a lot of different players out there, and I like Eddie said it the best. He said, Eddie didn't go up there and brag and say this guy's horrible, this guy's this. No, he said it's expression. It's from here. It's me giving myself and doing my things, and it's this guy doing his things, right? Eddie had a host of favorite guitar players. I think his favorite one was Eric Clapton, but he liked tons of people. Alan Holdsworth was awesome guitar player, and Eddie was always open about those things. He never claimed to be the greatest and I'm better than this or this guy's horrible. And I used to hear people doing that growing up, like, guys, they're all good. Nobody's the best. They're all the best in their own right. What do you who can define the best? The fastest is not the best. I'm telling you, as a guitar player, that's not true. The slowest isn't the best, right? There's a lot of guys out there that could play 800 notes a second, but who's making the money? Tom Petty plays songs with 2 and 3 chords, and he's the one writing songs that are touching the heart, right? And again, I'm not saying that to knock anybody out, but I do want to say that I thank these musicians, Buck, Eddie, for what they've done for me, my dad for opening up the floor for my getting me motivated and so forth. And I thank the time I got to meet Eddie Van Halen in Philadelphia International, because I knew he wasn't coming here on tour. I knew something was weird. I called Valerie's aunt, and she told me that the grandmother, and I may have confused this before, it's Grandma Angelina, right? I may have said Grandma Adeline, but that's not true. I mean, she was a grandmom too, but it's Grandma Angelina was the one on her deathbed when Eddie and Valerie were coming over to visit in Claymont, Delaware. And long story short, Jimmy, our guitarist, called from the airport or from the airplane in the air. You could use your credit cards then and make a call. And he's like, my dad's going to kill me. But guess who's on the plane? I said, I don't know. Eddie Van Halen? He goes, yeah. I said, you're kidding me. I said, walk up to him right now and tell him, are you going to Claymont, Delaware? Hangs up, calls me 20 minutes later and says, Aldo, Eddie says you're psychic. I said, I'm not psychic. I just know that they're not on tour. So at that moment, I called Valerie's aunt, Adeline, in Claymont, and I said, what's up? She said, Aldo, Valerie's grandmother is dying right now. And I said, oh my gosh. Oh, that's horrible. And I went to the airport to meet up with Jimmy and some others, and Eddie came off the plane. Valerie was there with Wolfgang. He must have been almost 2 years old. She was tending to him. I felt bad because I didn't get a chance to talk to them because they had to whisk away and get in the limousine. But Eddie saw my arm in a cast. He signed it. He signed the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge album, which I have in another room. And when he shook my hand, I thought he was going to break it off. I'm like, wow, what a grip. Now I know why when he did his reach and he did all those, cool things that he does. I'm like, no wonder why his hands are so strong. But he was the nicest guy. He could have pushed everybody away, but yet he took time to sign all of our memorabilia. And like I said in my other video, we took the picture and it came out wrong and messed up thanks to the screwed up camera of my friend. We all look like a bunch of goobers, but anyway. Oh, and by the way, Valerie and Eddie were married, I believe, April 11th, 1981, not 91. That was, if I said 91, I know when I looked at my other video, I meant to say 81 because I saw them at the Spectrum. I saw Van Halen 2 or 3 months later in 1981, July the 21st. And it was a great show. It was phenomenal. We can talk about that. But, I wanted to thank the Visby family, the Bertinelli family. They're very very beautiful people. I met Valerie's father, and he was just great. It was at Gail's wedding, I believe. I think I said Elaine, but that was wrong. But anyway, I wanted to show you the pictures. I wanted to show you again and add on to the my the genesis of my musical career and my love for rock music. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time. Please continue to listen to our stuff. Hopefully, new things will come out from unreleased material that we'll put out there for you. Thank you so much. All the love to you. It's been great. Thank you for the comments. Keep them coming. Keep telling others. We really appreciate it. We like that you like our stuff. So have a great weekend. Be safe, and we'll be in touch. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye bye.